Hello and welcome to our first lesson within Module 1, which is HTML. So in this learning section or lesson, we'll be going over the basics of HTML. And it's going to be very basic, and we're going to keep it that way. I do want to bring up the learning objectives for this lesson. So by the end of this lesson, students should be able to code a basic website using HTML. Whenever I say basic, I mean extremely basic. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to properly use headings to create a hierarchy of information, use paragraphs to display body text, to create active links, insert images into web pages, and this is going to include an alternative text and have defined width and height settings. Also be creating an HTML button, and by the end of this lesson you should be able to create HTML lists, both an unordered list and ordered list, and we'll get into all of that as well. So the first thing that we'll need to do is open up our editing or our HTML editor, and for this we'll be using Dreamweaver. So I'd previously worked on a different website. If this pops up, just hit cancel. We're going to be starting out new. So like I had mentioned, we're going to start something new, so hit create new. We're given a lot of options, but right now we're just working with HTML, and we're given some different options. The first one is to preset our title right now. Let's not worry about that. We are going to be working in HTML5, and we're not going to worry about CSS yet. We're just learning HTML. So I'm just going to hit create, and already Dreamweaver does a great job of trying to help us out and figure out what we need and get us to our end goal as quickly and as easy as possible. For learning purposes, I want you to highlight all of this preset text and code, and let's just delete it. So we're starting out on line 1. So the first thing that you'll need to understand is that HTML, or hypertext markup language, we have to tell the web browser that this document is beginning. And so that begins with this tag, and tags always appear within these brackets. So an exclamation point, doc, type, followed by a space and HTML, followed by our ending tag. So all this does is lets the web browser, so if it's Adobe, or if it's Google Chrome or Explorer, whatever it may be, that you're about to read an HTML document type. The next thing is going to be HTML, and you can see that it already tries to help you out. So if we were to hit enter, if we were able to click on it, it'll create our opening and closing tag for us. We can see that this is a closing tag right here because we have this open bracket followed by a slash. So we're going to click within between those two tags, the opening tag and the closing tag, and that's where we're going to continue building some of this content. So this HTML tag is letting the browser know that it is going to read some HTML code. What we will see begins with the tag body. So open the bracket body. Once again, it's going to help us, and we have the opening and closing body tag. So right now I'm in between these two tags. I'm going to hit enter. So the next thing that I want to talk about is HTML headings. So we've already created our HTML document. Now let's get into creating and putting in some actual content that we will see if we opened up this web page. So the first one is HTML headings. So a heading tag is H1, H2, H3, and so on. We can go down to H6. So whereas H1 is going to be the most prominent heading, H6 would be the least prominent heading. So let's take a look at what this would look like. So I'm going to do an open bracket to begin our tag, and in this instance it's going to be H1, and whenever I put that close bracket in, it automatically generates the closing tag for us. So right here I'm going to just type heading 1. So once I click up in this preview area, this white area, you have to click on it for it to refresh. But here we see heading 1. So I'm going to do this again, but with H2. And so once I hit that close bracket, it generates that closing tag for us. I'll just type heading 2. There we go. So we can do this all the way down to H6. And there we can see that heading 6 is one of the least prominent of the three. So the next thing that I want to go over are paragraphs, and this is denoted with the P tag. So a paragraph tag is simply a P. And so this is and so here we have our paragraph content under heading 1. So that one's pretty simple. I'm going to do one more. I'm just going to say for more information, click here. So the next thing that is on our objective list for the learning objectives is HTML links. So links begin with an anchor tag, and this is denoted with an A. Now, I want to point out that in previous times, all we had to do was create an open bracket with the tag letter, close bracket, and then within between the opening and closing tags, we put whatever we wanted. That's not the case when we create links. So we have to select an image or a word or a grouping of words that will be linked, that will be hyperlinked. So things get a little bit more complicated. So if we want the word here to be linked, this is what we would do. We first have to create an anchor tag. So I'm going to do an open bracket and A, okay? So we have it right here. I'm going to hit space, and the next thing is going to be href. This is hyperlink reference. So where do we want this link to take us? We're going to do an equal sign. That equal sign is directing us towards something. We have to say where do we want it to go. And it always will go in between quotation marks. So I'm going to do https://www.wtamu.edu. Close it out with our quotation, our double quotes, and then we can close our tag. Now, in between our opening and closing anchor tag, we have nothing. That's where, in between here is where the words or the image, whatever it may be, will go that we want to actually link. So in this instance, we want the word here to go in between our anchor tag. So now, over here, if we click here, we would go to the WTAMU homepage. So the next thing that we're going to go over is HTML images. And this is somewhat similar to what we've just done with the link. So if we're going to insert an image, the tag for that is img. But we have to provide something called the source, which is denoted with src. So once again, we have to do equal, open quotation marks, and now we have to find where this image is located. So one of the easier options is to hit browse, but I want to be sure that you're aware of that wherever this image is saved, it has to be in the same folder as where you are saving your web page. Because once this all gets migrated to a server, it all has to be together and it has to know where it's going. So I'm going to break the rule that I just said, and I'm just going to find an image right here. So it is now providing directions to that image. So file, it's in the C, users, ttarpley, my desktop, the folder, module 1. You can see that it goes through all of the different folders. Each time that it goes into a folder, it's denoted by this backslash. So the next thing that we need after the source is called an alternative text. So ALT is how we denote alternative text. Once again, an equal sign and quotation marks. So within the quotation marks will be the alternative text. The reason that alternative text is important is twofold. One is for things to be ADA accessible. So if somebody has a screen reader, obviously that person would be vision impaired and would not be able to see the image, but the alternative text will be read aloud to them while they're browsing a website. So it's extremely important that you're descriptive in your alternative text for this image. And the primary reason, or the initial reason, was because when we had slower internet, dial-up, whatever it may be, you could actually choose to turn off the images, so it would load, web pages would load faster, and all you would see was the alternative text. So for this instance, I'm just going to say bullseye, or darts on a bullseye. Now the next thing that we can manipulate within this first image tag, or the opening tag, is the height and the width. So if I just type, I'm going to do width first. Width equals, and then we can set a range in pixels. So I'm going to do 104 pixels with a height of 142. Now at this point I can close out this tag, and as you can see, it stretched our image because that was not the initial ratio that we've set. So we've broken that ratio. So what I can do is I can just define the width alone, and it'll keep that ratio, but it'll manipulate the width. Alright, we're getting towards the end of this short lesson. The next thing that I would like to show y'all is a button. So this is once again pretty simple. So the opening bracket followed by the word button. And the text goes within it. So I'm going to just say click me. And there we have our button. Alright, getting towards the end, so the last thing that I want to show y'all are HTML lists. So for this, it's really important when we get into things like CSS, you're going to be using lists a lot. So it's important that you understand them. And they can be a little confusing. So there are two types of lists. So I'm just going to do H2, and the first one's an unordered list. And the other type is an ordered list. So an unordered list uses bullet points. An ordered list uses numerical hierarchy, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for each of the list items. So unordered list would begin with the tag UL for unordered list. And each list item, or each time that you want a bullet point to appear, will be denoted with the tag LI. So between the opening and closing list item, we would have each of those items. So once again, LI, in between there, we put what we want to appear next to a bullet point. So we can take a look at what we have. So bullet points followed right next to the three items that we had defined within our unordered list. So we have our unordered list, and then within that opening tag we have our list items, and then at the end of it, as you can see, we have our closing tag. So the next one is going to be an ordered list, or OL. So within that, we're doing the same thing. We're going to have a list item, and I think it's T, and then milk. So once again, we have our opening tag for ordered list, followed by our list items, and then the closing tag for our lists. So as a review, we went over how to begin our coding a website. So we have our document type HTML, we have our opening HTML tag, we have our body tag for opening body tag, followed by everything that we're going to see on that screen. That's going to include things like headings, paragraphs, images, buttons, and unordered lists and ordered lists. And then at the end we have our closing body and HTML tags. So that is extremely basic, but it's going to give you a good start. Within your book, if you go for the HTML and CSS Visual Quick Start Guide 8th edition, you go to your first chapter, which is chapter 1. It goes into just a little bit more detail, but you're going to learn, for the most part, the same things that we just went over. I do want you to take a look at chapter 1. There's going to be more descriptions about this markup language, the hypertext markup language. It'll go into things like elements, attributes, values, everything that you need to know moving forward. So don't stop here. You're still expected to check out the book, take a look at chapter 1. It's going to be extremely important. So read pages 4 through 25. It'll be extremely important to the success within this class that you get through that first chapter. All right, be sure you take a look at the assignment for this first lesson, and take a look, be on the lookout for lesson 2 within module 1 HTML.